We're glad to say we have our next guest, Malachy, or Malachy rather, Ugwummadu, is a former president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. Malachy, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Your first pronunciation was the right one, Malachy.
Okay, all right.
Malachy Ugwummadu.
All right, interesting.
I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you very much.
Never mind, you are close to your Bible.
All right, Malachy, thank you so much for joining us at this time. Now, recent arrests and legal actions, against political figures have actually raised questions about the rule of law in Nigeria. Now, in your opinion, how can the government ensure that the legal processes are fair, transparent, and also free from political interference?
Well, it is interesting, although almost intriguing, that you are associating that to political interference. In other words, it appears you are drawing a conclusion that the scant attention and respect for the rule of law has so much to do with political interference. You cannot be too far from the truth. However, it is not just about political interference. It is also so much about the culture of impunity. And again, the total apprehension in quote now, the effective understanding of the implication of an absence of rule of law in a political system. So going by your position, perhaps we could start by that, to say that, look, the rule of law is a very well established principle of governance. It simply speaks to the, if you like, the preeminence of the law well above every other consideration. In other words, man and society shall be organized, shall be governed, not according to the whims and caprices of his or her fellow man, but by the rule of law. What that does is that it creates a level playing field, guarantees the certainty of the legal regime, and then reassures every member of that political setting as to what obtains in the event of anything. So when you dislodge that arrangement with the desires and caprices and tendencies and disposition of man, certainly there will no longer be any certainty. There will no longer be an assurance or guarantee that justice can be obtained. So from that philosophical, political standpoint, you come to our present situation. I mean, we talk about Nigeria, for instance, and you wonder how we are still where we are after several years of democratization process. Mark you, if you are talking of democracy, there are thresholds, there are irreducible minimum standards below which you are no longer talking of democracy. One of them, one of those pillars, those milestones, is the rule of law. The other is the independence of the judiciary. You have a vibrant and effective media which guarantees freedom of expression. You have a robust civil society component of that society. You have, as it were, participation of the people in governance. And above all, you have this point about rule of law. So if you discountenance it, you're no longer talking of democracy. You probably are referring to oligarchy or monarchy or any other form of government but democracy. So it is key. It is at the heart of every democratization effort.
All right.
So in direct response to your question, it is that the government, in short, it is in the enlightened self-interest of any government to ensure that there is in full operation and respect of the rule of law. To be fair to us, our constitution captures it. Our constitution under section 287, subsection 1, 2, and 3, talks about why every person, every institution, every authority in Nigeria must obey the orders of court and judgments of court. That is part of the rule of law. And because once the judgment is out, it becomes the law, and so on and so forth.
But like, quite interesting. You may want to agree, and I'm sure you'll agree, that the independence of the judiciary is crucial to upholding the rule of law. And it's interesting that you touched on the judiciary in your submission. Is Nigeria's judiciary today truly independent? You've touched on that a bit, but I want a clear-cut answer from you. I also would like you to compare the Nigerian judiciary of yesterday, even under the military era, to today when we have democracy, because some legal practitioners have argued that the soldiers had a bit of revere, had more respect for the judiciary. Was it better under the military administrations of years gone by? Did we have a more independent judiciary? And if yes, and if the judiciary is not independent today, does the judiciary itself have some of the blame to take for where they are right now?
That's quite loaded, and I thank you for that question. But unfortunately, it's a catch-22 situation. Those of us who actively and intentionally, deliberately participated in chasing the military away from our polity would not want you to continue in the line of your propositions. I'm sure you may have heard many people say that the worst civilian rule, democratic rule, is better than the best military rule. That statement is rooted in the philosophy of military intervention in civil polity. It is an aberration, a perversion, and indeed is a travesty. There is nothing connected between the military as an institution of force and regiment with governance, which recognizes and accommodates the highest level of plurality of views and contestation of ideas. The one is a marketplace of ideas and civil behavior. The other is intentionally, deliberately designed to violently, of course, let me be charitable to them to say effectively, but violently be able to defend. So they are not together. Now, I like that separation to be clear, because the temptation to mix it up, minimizes the damage that they have done even up to now. And many senior military officers have come to that conclusion. It is for that reason that they continually, particularly in times of uncertainty, renew their vow and commitment to civil rule and reassure whoever is the president of their total unalloyed loyalty. It is not peculiar.
Malachy, I'm sorry I used that, but those who bring in, please permit to interject, those who create that analogy do not refer to it to say or to suggest that the military were Democrats or was a better time. No. But there are stories of, soldiers giving the judiciary their distance at some point. Some even not able to order judges around to cow them, to scare them, and to desecrate the judiciary of sorts. We've heard several stories. But today, it could be argued the case is different. So I want your take on that and why that is, and whether the judiciary has itself to blame as well.
Oh, well, I was going to that, and please, there's no point being sorry about it. We're expressing ourselves, debating it the way we see it, and I was trying to lay a foundation. But I think you are right to the extent that the military, for instance, we have records to show that as brutal as they were, and for as long as they reigned in the political settings of this country, they were not very known to disobey court orders. They could, in one breath, roll out more than 6, 7 to 10 military decrees that completely undermines our liberty and freedom. But in fairness to them, and in retrospect, they had a way of recognizing that this is the judgment of courts, even if the tendency to also continue to violate that, raise its ugly head every now and then. But let's make the point clear. It is that the judiciary itself is a self-regulatory institution. Don't forget, it is an arm of government. Unlike the executive, created under Section 5 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it has a corresponding arm of government, that is the legislature, to check the excesses of the executive. The legislator itself, created under Section 4, has the Nigerian people, in whom the sovereignty of the country lies, to check what they do, either by way of civil society interventions or by campaign sensitization, and if you like, judicial interventions, as well as legislative reforms. In fact, I think under Section 68 of the same Constitution, the Nigerian people have the power to recall an elected legislator, whether the Senate or in the House of Representatives, ditto to the State House of Assembly members. But that is not applicable to the judiciary. Once appointed, they are self-regulated, which is what the National Judicial Council does, as well as other institutions within the judiciary to check not just their competence, but their conduct, as well as excesses. So, to the extent that those checks are not effectively implemented, and to the extent that we see malfeasance, transgressions within the same self-regulatory institution, members of the same self-regulated institution, to that extent, I take the view that it is not effective or as effective as it ought to be. So what is the way forward? The way forward is to continue to tinker with these institutions, create reforms around the loopholes we have found. For instance, in the judiciary, it is completely wrong, and I have had cause to canvass this position even at the highest level. Again, by tomorrow, I'm also invited to Abuja, to the National Judicial National Judicial Institute, as well as EFCC, to deal with some of this matter as a discussion to a major paper in the conference. It is completely wrong. Under our constitution, are presently constituted, to have a recruitment process of our judicial officers loaded in the hands of just one single person.
All right, Malachy.
It ought to be.
Sorry, I actually have to come in here. But first of all, thank you so much for your insight on this particular issue. It's really, really extensive. But, you know, Nigeria has actually been faced with criticisms over its human rights record, you know, particularly in relation to security operations. I think we actually saw, you know, what went on during the NSAS protest and other protests as well. Now, but how can government balance national security concerns with respecting human rights and also international obligations?
Well, the network was acting up, but I imagine that you're trying to find out how we could deal with national security vis-a-vis
the question is, yes,
right.
How can the government balance national security concerns with respecting human rights and also international obligations?
In my view, they are not inclusive. They are mutually exclusive. In other words, the government has a responsibility to deal with human rights and respect and protect human rights regardless of the security. I mean, the Constitution is clear about what constitutes human rights. And by the way, when you talk of human rights, we also have fundamental rights. It is human because I'm a human being. So I have my human right to express myself because I have my tongues. I have my human right to move because I have my legs. So they inure to me by reason of the fact that I am human. They are fundamental because they are coded. They have been codified. They have been enacted into laws. I guess I thought that clarification was important. Now, all of these are found under Chapter 4 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We also have civil and political rights under Chapter 2, dealing with the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state politics. Now, these are different from what constitutes security, national or external security. So the responsibility of government, the primary responsibility of government, the irreducible minimum condition of governance is to protect those rights, particularly the rights to life and the property of citizens. This is what you have under Section 14, Subsection 2B. So any attempt to begin to justify the encroachment or abridgment of these rights on account of security, in my view, amounts to abdication of the responsibility of any government anyway. So let us not fall into the temptation of trying to model them up. No, they are not. I'm a practicing lawyer. I'm aware of certain judicial authorities, even up to Supreme Court, that suggests that in the face of national security, the private rights of an individual takes the backstage. That debate is still on. And we are saying in the human rights community that it cannot stand. It is immaterial that it has been proposed as the position of the law. But anything that compromises the fundamental rights of any Nigerian in favor of any other thing has become a travesty. And let's not make so much noise about it. It is that whoever assumes the responsibility of leadership must be able to protect not just the citizens, but their properties. In fact, if you look at the Nigerian Police Force Establishment Act 2020, currently, you would find that the police has come under a duty, unlike what it used to be in the old legislation, to even provide security to Nigerians who have decided to protest and march on the streets, as is being proposed tomorrow or next. Now, the idea behind that is to ensure that that right which they have, which is the right to freely express themselves and move, is not gagged in any form.
All right.
Under the pretense of security.
Okay. Malachy, quite interesting. You've said so much and given the Nigerians, both home and abroad, a lot of food for thought as far as the national life rule of law is concerned. There's so many issues to look at, talking about corruption, for instance, electoral reform and all that. And we know that at some point in time, we'll have you back on set to talk about this. But thank you so much, Malachy Ugwummadu, a former president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. And of course, you played no mean role in Nigeria's return to democracy. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was my pleasure.